Hello.
Hello.
Hello, lovely. How you
Hello.
doing?
Hello, Parallel Perception community. We are back. I'm Angel Samadi and here with Lujan Matus discussing his book, The Power of Emptiness. If you're just joining us, this is the third of what should be 5 videos into a deep dive into the power of emptiness. So please go back and watch those other 2 if you have not been with us from the start. Wonderful. One thing that's prevalent throughout this teaching or the segment of chapters that we're going over today is Buddha's, the saying from Buddha. As I am, so are others. As others are, so am I, and the rest. And so we wanted to kind of make sure that that was in the forefront of your mind. Having thus identified self and others, harm no one, nor have them harmed. And just put that out there because we're going to revisit parts of that throughout today's. And a quick recapitulation of the first 2 videos and an overview of what we're going to go get into today. So from the beginning, first video, preliminary, we looked at why seek emptiness and emptiness from what? How to incorporate the teachings from Whisperings of the Dragon and Who Am I and how they will benefit your learning. Talked about a lot of the parables and metaphors and analogies in the mango grove in our last video, and just started getting to the part where we're meeting the teacher behind the grove master. So we are going to pick up and continue today with Pathways of My Memory. But the other chapters we're going to visit are the shepherd, the mountain, and then I am mountain, I am. I kind of changed the order a little bit. And the Bodhi tree and the riddle. So that's what we're going over today. So let's get started with Pathways of My Memory. You start as a 5-year-old young boy that wants to enter the monastery, which I can't even imagine a 5-year-old conceiving of such a request, but it's beautiful. And he is to enter the monastery and lose all contact with his parents until at least age 21, though he stays a lot longer. And one of the reasons is he had to be totally retaught from his entire way of being. And this is where we're going to start learning about how to develop devotion without motive. You want to say anything to get us started, Lujan?
Well, it's a particularly very beautiful chapter. It has very, very soft and communal qualities within it. The boy was trained by the master to clean the pathways, whether it's leaves or flowers. And while he was doing this, the feeling that was generated was to make sure that everything was clear, so that all the old monks could enter the path without any inhibitions, any obstacles at all. He would already be there cleaning them, and they'd already done that through their lives themselves. They entered the monastery as children, and as a young child was doing exactly the same as what they were doing. There was an absolute communion because they'd already been there in terms of their own sense of self to remember what they had previously done, and also the sense of the boy caring for the old masters to such a degree that they would feel comfortable and free to do their practice, and the practice itself would be devotional towards the environment, especially the new host of the pathways, which was the young lad that was taken in and shown how to be respectful and kind and diligent within his propagating his feelings of devotion. And the way this is done is to sweep the pathways. You can imagine the pathways are bringing about clarity of heart, clarity of feeling, clarity of what you need to do, and the clarity of actually doing what needs to be done until it's behind you. So that and the trees were quite magnificent for this. So you could say frangipani trees, or trees which let go of their flowers and drop them to the ground. So this is a very, very beautiful act to be engaged in terms of the leaves represented what was dropped and what was meant to be let go of. The flowers were the fragrant medium of the goodness of the heart, which settled into the devotional path and had no expectations, but the flowers themselves gave the fragrance of the beauty of the action to do something without holding on to any expectations of exchange in terms of being rewarded. And the reward itself is generally that the job is well done, and when the job is finished, that's all it is. It's done. But when the old masters walked along the path, they could see that it was clear. They could feel that their devotion was given the length and breadth of their expansion into the labor of the young boy, so that they could see that he himself was just a reflection of them. So it gave them the capacity to realize that the useful devotion became the old men's capacity to be grateful for the work of a young person, to bring them the capacity to walk unencumbered. And also too that because they were unencumbered, they gave their devotion to him via the memories of their own being doing exactly the same chores. So it becomes full circle.
I thought it was interesting that immediately you talked about them. Immediately he was taught to kind of tread softly and very unobtrusively, whether it was in the meditation room, whether it was in the dining room where we waited for everyone to be able to eat. And you said that was modeling a silent prayer of inaction. And I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, that's very lovely. If you imagined you're in a corporation, and someone with authority has clicking heels, and they click 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 down the hallways, and you can hear them coming, and they listen to the sound of the reverberation of the quality of their being spreading into all the offices. It's the same as if somebody walks through a house, and even if you're in a situation where you have someone living underneath you, bang 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 on top of you, or you can hear the intentions of someone via the way they walk. So treading carefully and treading quietly is to be so unintrusive, and also to be not noticed as much as you can, not to be noticed, in terms of being respectful, and whatever emanates from your sounds is like a soft whisper instead of a loud pronouncement that you've entered. And the loud pronouncement that you entered is also intentional base in terms of the body reverberating and doing something which it's been habitually trained to do, and then people get or become habitually connected to the entanglement of that entrainment. So what the master was doing with the child was teaching him not to be too intrusive, not to entrain anybody else to listen for him coming, because the reverberation of his steps were as soft as the softness of the hearts of the older monks. So they could feel that softness instead of the harshness of steps, which would step on their softness or their heartfelt devotion. Yeah.
I hadn't looked at it that way about walking hard, and how that, and you really can interpret someone's intent by their footsteps. That's
you sure
that's
can.
very interesting. And so there's something to be about not being known. You know, they haven't heard you come, so don't have an opportunity to preform an expectation. Or that's wonderful. So the flowers and the leaves that were on the pathway, you said were memories that plague us, and by starting with a clean slate daily, it kind of frees us from that suffering. And so even though the flower petals themselves are beautiful, but they've served their purpose, and kind of starting with a clean slate each day.
Well, you could look at it this way: is that if you're cleaning up the leaves have kind of gone a little bit brown. They're useful for compost. They're useful. They've been beautiful on the tree, and then they gain another quality, and the quality is to become composted and become useful in a different way. And how can we become useful in a different way ourselves, in terms of what's not viable anymore? We let go of it. It dries up and gets blown away by the wind, or gets swept away by actions that clean the internal system. The flowers are unusual because they represent beauty on the tree itself, but when they fall, they're still beautiful. They can still be picked up, and it's a ceremonial process as far as from an Asian perspective. They pick them up, but if they smell them, they're useless. But if they pick them up and not smell them, they still have the power of the intention of the tree within it. But once you smell the flower, you take the magic of the unintrusive tree, and you take it inside of yourself. You can't use it for ceremony after that because you've already taken the magic of that quality inside of your body. So if you wanted to use it to give to someone, you don't smell it. You give it to someone without smelling it. If you want to enjoy it, you take it in yourself. And as you take it in yourself, you then take the full ramifications of the hard labor of that tree in terms of its quality of giving something beautiful. Yeah.
You made mention.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you made
mention. It's okay.
You made mention of not smelling a flower that you're going to use for gazing because it would take the magic. And so I just hear you say that again. And that if you're going to give one, don't take that fragrance, save that for the gift. So I just thought that was a note.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Save it for a gift. Now, if you use flowers like in Awakening the Third Eye, my second book,
right.
You take the fragrance, you don't smell it. You put a flame behind a bowl of water. You put all of the flowers into the water. So there's a combination of the process of the tree in there without you taking it. So the tree itself becomes maybe a ceremonial object of focus because your devotional focus upon the leaves are the same as their devotional focus upon you, because they attract you. They've got many different ways of manipulating us plants, but it's a matter of what type of entanglement does occur between beings because of the repetitive nature of their connection. So then that can be reversed into engineering your consciousness and say, what do I expect? What am I getting back? And this is like looking at the value of karma. Karma is basically, if I'm not resembling any form of feeling and I attract a feeling, I don't become connected to the field because I don't practice it anymore. So I've inadvertently cut my ties with the karmic rule of that particular feeling. So if I don't have it, then I can take it into my reservoirs of emptiness, and then revert the karmic process of someone realizing they're caught in something, and then give it back in different words, which may have taken them a lifetime to get to, but it quickens the process. That's what a teacher is for, is to quicken their process and let them understand that there is another way to see the process of entanglement that they're engaged within through the medium of the teacher's sabchi. And sabchi is a transmission of pure feeling that has the essence of the smell and the taste of the living essence of the person who's overcome these particular obstacles. And also sabchi in Indian, when someone cooks you food, and they cook you food with so much devotion, they call it sabchi because it goes into the body, and the devotional essence of the person who cooks the food becomes the devotional essence of the person who eats the food. So gratitude goes in. Gratitude then comes upon the person to say, thank you very much for the meal. It was so beautiful. I feel great. And then you're honoring the substance of emptiness, or the substance of the whole creation, by giving the process of devotion to someone who's been devoted to giving food in a way which is supportive to your whole system. So the wish towards you is nothing but genuine, because they wouldn't put anything other than a genuine wish into the food they give to their family or their guests, because that would be a travesty, especially for an Indian. Especially the old methods the Indians used to use in India. They were very, very beautifully defined, devoted individuals until the English came in and just messed them up quite a bit, actually.
They have a tendency of doing that all over the world, but that's another story. No.
Yeah, that's another story. That's another entanglement. We don't want to go there.
Exactly. But there's two things I wanted to talk to you about when you talked about how the young boy would immediately clean up the dishes immediately after their use and honoring their youthfulness. There's two things about those dishes. One, I found that very interesting. the dishes became that entity that he said as he was looking at them, they were gazing back at him. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that, but honoring just the usefulness. There was something about resetting those dishes immediately as if they had never been used and making them ready again, not sitting them in the sink, soaking. And what was is there a fine-tuned significance other than just the practicality of that?
Yeah. Do you remember, I don't know, in our private conversations, I said to you, you're very similar to me. You want things done 3 weeks ago. The reason that this is in the book is to give value to the fact that your house and your environment is a temple. So if you just say I took these Rudraksha and I hanged them over clothing which was wrinkled, and when I hang the Rudraksha over clothing which is wrinkled, it end up being anti-clockwise or negative. If I have a clothing which has been ironed, which I put a lot of love into and a lot of care, so it represents the fact that I'm diligent. I put the Rudrakshas over, it'll go positive. It won't go anti-clockwise, it'll go clockwise. And if a tablecloth is on a table and it's perfectly clear and there was no other reason than just to put it on the table, and it's not wrinkled in any way, it doesn't have any purpose, you put a Rudraksha over that, it'll be neutral. So the reason for this, what my explanation with this is that the reason Rudrakshas are used for this because they grow in a very, very high regions of the Himalayas in the mountains, so their frequency is very, very refined. So anything less subtle than they are will be indicated by them, and then we'll reorganize the energy and let you know exactly what they are through the absorption of that particular energy or the field of potential that energy has, whether it's been not catered to, or whether it's just neutral. And the reason you wear them is that when it comes to it, reorganizes anything which is neutral, anything which is negative, anything which is positive, it takes it and then spreads it through the body very, very smoothly. So it's like an actual mirror, or a protective mirror. And the Rudraksha, they're called Shiva's tears. And I guess you could interpret the Shiva's tears as why would you call them Shiva's tears? Because they rain down with the potential of becoming something other than what they really are. If you become something other than what you really are, then the devotion to that is kind of like a state of mourning. So that's why they're called Rudraksha in terms of Shiva's tears, is because they cry upon the world because they're not realized in terms of who they really are, because they can become positive and negative or neutral instead of just absolutely empty. And that's why they're called Shiva's tears.
That's beautiful. I've never known that or never heard that. I like that. Shiva's tears and a constant state of mourning. And if we're mindful of what's around, I like that. Thank you. And
so, Shiva means, sorry, lovely.
No, go ahead.
Shiva means the power of emptiness within action. Shiva. Your Shiva Shakti, Shiva is the power of action with emptiness behind it, Shiva. Yeah. It's very much like the Big Bang. There was nothing there until something happened.
Absolutely, yeah. And then
and then it just kept going.
And we're still expanding.
We're still expanding.
So you made the comment, a couple of things toward the end of that chapter that I thought were interesting, is you made the comment about, or the boy feeling the dishes, looking at him and watching him. And then also, kind of, when you were talking about the gazing in the awakening third eye, what we gaze at gazes back at us, and how that reflects how the character of a space changes based on its inhabitants.
Yeah. Now, if you go to a temple and you go into the temple and you know that it's been set properly, it's been built by the length of some of the bones in your little finger, but this isn't done in the Western society. It's very rarely done in India anymore, because these types of philosophies are being lost, or these sciences are not really philosophies, they're sciences. So it's so if I come into a house, just say I've come into this house. And what I did was rearrange everything, so everything became very, very still. And when the owners came in, they said, "Well, what did you do? This feels so beautiful." And I said, "I just rearranged it so it's still, and so that it can magnify goodness instead of confusion." But the thing is that our DNA goes into our clothing, so we're a process of
what does? What
our
goes in?
DNA goes
Oh, our
like clothing.
DNA. Okay.
Yeah, our DNA spreads everywhere. So, when you look at this in terms of the household, is that the alchemical process of our being expands into the environment, and the environment then reflects back on you because there's really nothing there. So you've got to care for the environment as you enter it, and it reflects back to you its feelings. So if you one of the strongest things I didn't even know I was going to say this is that I was born in a household where there was so much tension, and under that tension I was so uncomfortable because you could cut the air with a pair of scissors, or you cut the air with a knife. You know the saying of this. And I had to focus very, very strongly on trying to neutralize the negative elements of all the violence, all the mayhem, all the misunderstanding with the generation that brought me into the world, or the people who brought me into the world. And I realized that I was in the wrong nest. And as I realized I was in the wrong nest, no matter what I did, there was always a destructive force coming towards me, because I'm still kind of Tourette's. I will say everything that I feel. I will reveal everything that's going on, and nobody really liked it. So there's a concerted effort to destroy this strange little boy that would actually tell you what's going on. And if you would hide anything, I would find it. If you would secretly have something, I would know it. They would lock me in the cupboards. They would lock me in the bathroom. They would lock, they would do everything to try and stop me from being like this. But I was in a total state of reception. But it was very painful to actually realize that what they were emanating was reflecting back so deeply that there was no harmony, no happiness, no peace, no quiet. And I was very, very aware of that. So putting this into the book is quite relevant, because if you walk into a room with someone who loves you and they greet you with how profound that feeling is towards you, you'll be enveloped by that. If you walk into a room and somebody's weaponized towards you, you'll feel it. So it's just basically we're in command of what we can do with our environment in terms of how we emanate from ourselves to find the proper mirror to reflect back on us, so that we can be comfortable and be seen by the environment, because the environment understands that some destructive force could actually tear us away from our original purpose to a purpose which is not arranged or original for us. We become false. So we endeavor not to be false. We endeavor to be exactly who we're really meant to be, in the most profound way that we can. And as it becomes more and more profound, like the elements of the environment will sing to you. Now, if someone moves something in the house, I'll know it when I'm in my office. So if Mr. moves something, I'll go looking for it, and I'll find it's in a different spot. I'll just rearrange it and just put it back where it is, or the cat's knocked something over or something like this. So it's this also happened in Bali, though. I frightened the Balinese quite a bit, actually. They were very scared of me. I discovered a water spirit as I was doing my practices in the morning. And this water spirit would look like a black flag. And it's sort of integrated with me because it allowed me to see it for a second. And then it did some really mischievous things, really mischievous. We had put our passports on a couch. And they were on the couch. We didn't do anything. We didn't leave the room. I looked up and I was talking to Miss, and I looked up. I said, "Oh no, the passports are gone. And where are they?" We went searching around. I went downstairs, looked in the safe and everything. I came back upstairs, and there they were, right exactly where we left them. And I thought, that's really strange. And I had no notion that it was the water spirit just playing a little game, little thing with us. And then the next day, I took the passports and I put them in the safe. And I put them in the safe, and I opened up the safe, and oh no, the passports are gone. So we freaked out again, and we were looking around the house and everything like that. And I took Miss down, I opened up the safe again, and there they were. And Suma, he's passed away now, beautiful Suma, my very, very good Balinese friend. He says, "Oh, water spirits are very well known to test your capacity to handle what they're doing, and then by however you handle what they're doing, they will represent you with the same energy that you handle it with." So we were quite freaked out. So we were wondering, where is everything? We need everything to be in the right position. Now, when we would do our visa run, and we're in another country. I would know when someone would come in the house. I've already got this ability, but the water spirit would thump, 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 slam, cupboards and everything like that. The Balans would get frightened. They said, "Oh my God, Lujan's got a security guard," and they realized that their water spirit was protecting the house. I mean, this is so far-fetched and so hard to understand, I know, but it really did happen. Yeah, so I don't know why I went down there. Why did I go down there?
Well, I think that I think we kind of went off that exit when we were talking about when we were talking about how the character, the space of the room changes with its inhabitants. And you said something very important about the spirit, that the water spirit would react in kind to the energy you projected back to it. And so that's something that is very powerful. So we weren't too far off. We went
too far. So the good thing was it knew that I'm very diligent. Even if I go out, I put my license around my waist and everything. I never take it off. So it protected the house in the same vein. So when anyone walked into the house, it would make noises to prepare them to say, "Well, I'm here," and I would know it from a distance anyway. I would always know. I'd always ring and say, "Gee, were you in the house?" They said, "How did you know?" They were frightened of me. And I said, "Well, I can feel you and I can see you. As soon as you walked into the house, I could see you now." This goes back to another subject, with the gazing of the plants, the plant gazing, and we're using these particular plants. I used one particular plant until it was 6 feet tall, just the same size as me, and I put it on the front doorstep. Now, I've been gazing at it with my students for years before I wrote the book, and anyway, so my Balinese person would come in to clean the house, and my face would be projected from the plant to his face, and he would go, "Lujan, what's going on?" And I said, "It's just protecting the house for me." So it's all these sorts of funny things going on, and he would say, "Well, it just frightens me," and I said, "It's just protecting me." And as soon as it saw you, I saw you entering. Ooh. So, so this is the devotion of plants. As long as your speed of comprehension, your breath is slow, you don't have an internal dialogue, everything slows down, you will make an entanglement connection with the plants. But the speed of your breath and the speed of your feeling centers have to be generally on the same ebb and flow as them to understand their transmission toward you. Exactly the same as when we spoke about the transmission of my cat into my head. We are so far behind our potential because we've been occupied with it's not possible for someone to read your mind. It's not possible for someone to read your feelings. I mean, that's what we're here to learn.
So I think it's interesting that you gazed at that plant long enough that it became a reflection of your image and a portal for your eyes, and that's pretty deep.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. But the thing is, when you open up, there's a particular matrix when you work on your spine. You open up the root of your sacral base. You open up your heavenly gate. There's a central point inside your head between the pituitary and the pineal gland, which releases DMT, especially if the pumps in your body are working properly, and it fills these areas, these crystalline areas, and they become active, and you have a release of DMT. And this release of DMT, quite frankly, I would say, well, I'm stoned all the time because I'm actually always releasing. Yeah, no, truly come to see it by my ass.
I like that. That's DMT on tap. I like it.
DMT on tap, yeah. And this comes about from a genuine still feeling of communion with the environment, because once you commune with the environment, you must open up to the doorways which present themselves to you, and the only way you can do that is to rearrange the chemical process of the automated process of your body to open up, because you've stopped doing things which don't allow you to open up. Stop doing things.
Not doings. Okay, so you made a comment that the image that you receive when you enter a room tells you exactly what needs to be done in that situation, that you can enter a room and get an image. Could you expound on that?
Well, you know, when you're very inspired, you've cleaned your house and everything like this, and you look at your furniture and you go, okay, this could be in a different spot. You experiment until it becomes comfortable. And when it becomes comfortable, it becomes part and parcel of your creation. So if somebody else walks in to that creation, it should be an indication, or a signal should be sent to the owner of the property that somebody's there, you know. And I've also written about this in Awakening the Third Eye as well. I'm
Mhm.
terrible, but
No, that's good.
when I was in Bali, there was a datura plant. Datura plants are used by shamans to indicate and to help them notice if someone's on their property, or to stop somebody coming in their property, whether they've sent them black magic or whether they've sent them this or that. I'm not into this gear, guys, so don't think that I'm into it. I'm not into it at all. I think it's abhorrent. I think it's dirty. I think it's not the right way to proceed with life. But the thing is, we had a datura plant, and the Balinese were walking past, and it was tugging on their hair and everything like this. And I said, you've got to take the datura out, because it's going to ruin the water on your property, and it will also make the owner overbearing and impossible to get along with. And the owner was overbearing and impossible to get along with. So I said, take it out, throw it over into the rice field, and there were a few leaves looking like this over the fence. I said, better cut those off because it's still looking in here. And they cut off. And I said, get as much of the root out that you possibly can, because as much as the plant is on the surface, the same amount is in the ground. So it's just like the tree of life in terms of the elements of our spine. And this is like a perversion of our process of spiritual beings to actually enter into these entities which then overtake your being, because you've allowed them to overtake you, because you've digressed by going lower than what you should go low. Should leave them alone, should know exactly what the capabilities are, and just keep your distance, because that's the framework of that entity. And if you know that's the framework of it, you respect and leave it alone. You don't use it for your own benefit. If you use it for your own benefit, it's going to take a payment from you.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, yeah. And that payment is very severe. So when I asked the Balinese, I said, take it out. All the water problems in that particular little house was resolved. There was always water problems, and there were leaking taps, nothing was working. Everyone was scared to go in there. As soon as we took it away, the owner got very, very gentle, because she didn't know that there were consequences for the owner to have this in the house. As soon as we took it away, she became very, very gentle, very, very soft, very, very supportive. A totally opposite character.
So this is a little off, but if that plant can wreak so much havoc, is there a plant that can be more conducive to peace and harmony that we need to buy?
The one that rotates right inside your chest. This is the only flower that we have to manage with utmost diligence and care, And also, you can have beautiful flowers, and if they reflect back to you the mannerisms that exist within them, you'll realize whether you've got a good plant or not, or a destructive plant, because you'll be drawn off your path. And if you're drawn off your path, if you're looking for power, which is a fast track to something, it's a dead end street, because a fast track to something is a fast track to nothing. Because if you get there too quickly, you haven't matured enough to realize who you've become, and you're not mature enough to realize the ultimate outcome of who you become. So you have to be very, very patient to open up your own potential, and not use a path that speeds the process up. And there's no speeding up the process. It gives you the illusion that you've realized something. You come back, you've got a lot to say, but you can't unfold in an honest and progressive manner. You become a witch. We don't want that.
No, anyone that's manipulating. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now that makes sense.
We're going right off the path, haven't we? But
that's really very good. I wanted to talk about how that leads us into, you're talking about the subtle disharmonies, and you said that the awareness of the hallways of light are triggered by some subtle disharmonies. And if we're talking about impressions that are coming in from those who are manipulating the circumstances and surroundings around us, how does that help to awaken our hallways of light? And understanding the hallways of light as a clear pathway to receive, correct?
Yeah. You can imagine that if you've got a beam of light. Now, if you've got a beam of light and some magnetic field goes through that particular light, there'll be a bending of the photons, even though you don't really see it as the magnet goes through it, but there is a bending of the light, or it is distortion of the light. And is when your mind becomes very, very relaxed, stops thinking, it drops into the body. So this mist drops inside the body, and then it can appear between the hands, and these, if it can appear between the hands, is very, very malleable. So if somebody comes, then these hallways fluctuate with the pressure which is inherently given by another electromagnetic being. So if your hallways are more empty and not full of substance or characteritures, you've got character in there. You got to break your character, become who you're really meant to be. So once the disruption comes in, it bends the field. Once it bends the field, it's like someone pushing you. They bend the field, and you go, "Oh, why are you pushing me?" And then boom, and they're off. But we have the capacity to oscillate in comparison to the pressure given to us. Are we aware enough to actually realize the oscillation of that particular pressure inside of our being before we interpret anything with our mind? As we switch our mind off, and the full interpretation of the bending of the fields of perception are totally available at that particular point.
Okay, now that makes more sense, because that ties into why you get the image when you enter the room. It's the feeling, the being anchored in that silence. That prayer of inaction allows that information to come in if we're open enough to receive it and to tune into it.
Now, very, very interesting. Prayer of inaction. Prayer is denoted as already arrived. So if you've already arrived, the prayer is already operational, and your whole being exudes itself into the environment. Even if you don't have a want and a need, the prayer of your being fills the environment with the fulfillment of your characteristics that are building the mountain within you. And then not getting offended with what the mountain does to you, because
I just made a note to tie that into my mountain chapter. I just saw that.
You know the thing.
That was anyway, nice.
Yeah. So the characteristics of the mountain is to test the viability of your sensitivity without you becoming offended or believing that something is good or bad, but it's actually pretty neutral. Because there really is no good or bad. It's how we interpret it. I mean, if you break your leg, yeah, obviously that's no good. But the thing is that it's not personal by the mountain. The mountain doesn't really give three flying hoots about it. It's just a matter that it happened through the you didn't have enough power to put your foot here instead of there. And if you didn't have enough power, there are consequences to not being aware. And there are consequences of being aware for somebody else in the wilderness or in an environment, because the consequences of their inability to understand can have consequences on the person who's instructing them. So it's so you've got to be very, very careful to guide people not to lead you into a position of danger, even if they don't perceive the danger for you is so subtle and so vitally important for you not to go there. And if you're led by a student, then it's very, very dangerous. And you've got to ask the student to just withdraw a little bit and don't do this, because I don't do that anymore. I can't be pulled into this. You have to come to me. I can't come to you. And as they come to you, they end up dropping the elements that you can't be engaged in anymore. If you allow yourself to be engaged in it, it's very dangerous, because it's no longer viable for you to be there in that space. And if you do enter that space, it may be very tragic. So if you have enough power to realize that there could be a tragic result for you interacting with somebody you shouldn't really interact with, if you've got enough strength and enough power to redivert the consequences of that through understanding and giving a transmission to the person that see the dangers that have set up because I followed you here. So we attempt not to follow students. We ask the students to drop everything that they've got to attempt to discover where we are, because you can't go back. Impossible to go back, actually. If you make the mistake of going back.
And that's a silent transmission we're bidding them at that point.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to just make that clear. We're not telling them.
No, not telling them.
Promote conflict, but a silent transmission that. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But also too that you've got to on occasions you have to explain things fairly deeply, and the possibility of understanding the deep meanings within the words may not be comprehended by the person you're explaining it to. They'll only pick up what's personal of them instead of what's impersonal coming from an instruction. So it's a delicate field.
Well, thank you. So that was our pathways chapter. Now we go to the shepherd and revisit the parable of the lost lamb. So this is interesting because most people have heard, if you've got a Christian background, that Jesus left the 99 sheep to find the one and bring him back, and they use it as an analogy for, saviorship. However, there's a different trend, a different way to do this, a different way to view this parable and glean deeper understandings. So how do the transmissions, well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Is there anything that you want to say to comment before we get into that?
Okay, there's something I didn't write in the book. Imagine that I'm fully integrated. One part of myself leaves that integration. Now, I'm safe within the integration, safe with the prospect of what's been gathered in terms of the hard labor that I've gone through to get to somewhere. Now, if some part of me wanders off, I have to leave the refuge of everything that I've gained to pull myself back. Or, you understand.
Keep talking, it's coming.
You've got to understand that you pull yourself back from a place where you shouldn't have entered. Here we go again, you see? It's so well done what you've done here. You pull yourself back from where you shouldn't be, and instead of following the dictum of an individual that doesn't really understand when they're lost, you can be this way. Even if I'm looking for that person, they've lost they don't have integration, they don't have a correct understanding, or an understanding which has substance, then you slowly bring them back to yourself. And as you bring them back to yourself, you find alignment, because you leave as they leave, you return as they return, because the substance of your sensitivity is like this. So so the parable is that as soon as someone starts to veer away from the path, you veer away from the path because you connect it. So there's a form of entanglement between student disciple, student teacher, and as they wander like this, you wander. Your body goes like this. So you just go, okay, is it possible that you can understand if I explain it to you this way? If they release themselves on that point, you don't chase anymore. Let them go.
So that ties into what you just said. I think about the psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd," and there's a verse in there that says, "Thy rod and thy staff comfort me." And I think about that rod pulling that.
The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want.
I shall not want. But that rod and staff that's comforting, I had to ponder on that, and that's pulling back in what we're actually looking for. And
because the stability of a stance is to hold yourself upright in treacherous terrain.
Oh.
Yeah. So you look at this in many, many different ways to awaken. Every single system has little secrets, and hidden within it has the prospect of why it's there. So as you wander through the treacherous terrain, it holds you upright so that you don't lose your footing. So my staff, my rod, comforts me, because if it wasn't there, I could quite frankly fall over and hurt myself. Especially when you're 400 years old, dear.
Definitely, we need
I think it was 900.
Okay, that's a different way to look at that. I love the little nuances in the re-examination. And so in this chapter, the point is that we're not looking for a lost lamb or a lost person. We're looking for
the prospect of ourselves coming back home. And if the prospect of ourselves coming back home is represented by someone we've taken into our heart, and we say, well, just come back here for a second, let me explain. And you can only do that a couple of times. And if the explanation is not really heard, you have to let the willfulness and the inability of the person to actually comprehend that they've lost their way in a certain state of consciousness. So just let them go, let them learn their lessons. I've done this to quite a few students. 10 years later, they come back and go, geez.
Because you still planted a seed, so it's just they're not ready to harvest it, so it's going to sit dormant, hopefully. So you said that we're also looking for our forgotten innocence, our original consciousness, our light, by our shepherd, which is the body, to be returned to the flock, which is all the complex elements of consciousness.
Oh, you're good.
So that's a lot to be looking at.
Well, as you're speaking, I'm looking at the Buddha looking down with his eyes closed. Its whole perception is that I only exist within this small area of awareness. Everything else is gone.
I like that.
Everything else is gone. That's a representation of the Buddha behind you. And also it looks like a child Buddha. So so the representation is that I'm here within my innocence. Can I stay in this area of perception without the layers of disarray coming into my being and confusing this one particular point?
And in that focus, that pinpoint focus, is so much peace, because you're not subject to all the periphery of anything that's going to pull you out of that peace. And that's
and that's mastery. Is not to be taken away from your center, but to realize your center has something to say about being taken away from its point.
So then you talk about the antenna, or the beam of light that comes down through the center of our being from our first, mid, and lower dantians, and then how that branches out.
Traditionally this is called Zhong Ding, or the center of the body. But the Zhong Ding of the center of the body is like a wave. To have your crown directly over your perineal base, and have your coccyx, your hips slightly tucked, so you're perfectly aligned. Then it's alignment of your spine, which is very confusing for a lot of people in the internal world. Is that it's not about grounding; it's about being aware of your spine, and about elevating consciousness, or adjusting the consciousness of the body to be knitted in a way that it becomes one whole piece. And when it becomes one whole piece, then you just make a little bit of room. So if I go like this, or if I have my shoulders even normal and they're totally flat, I can still move it half an inch, open it half an inch. So once you open up your joints, you cause a cold fire inside of the body, which causes an expansion process, which somebody else can't discover the central line of your emptiness, or how it moves. But it always moves in comparison to somebody else, but you never arrange yourself to be aware of somebody else. You only become aware of yourself. And if you capture somewhere, you find some form of expansion inside of yourself, not to be captured. It's a very, very interesting. Internal art is very, very interesting in terms of the prospect of what does this really mean in terms of my capacity to communicate what I'm doing physically. And this becomes, then you look at the whole process of alignment. You're actually becoming aligned with your water body, or your spirit body. And your spirit body is very, very important for its alignment. It's very important to actually learn to see that spirit body and see how it's adjusting away from its central axis, or wherever it's said central axis can't be recognized or contained with the person who hasn't realized. Now, I've probably gone off into a tangent here. This is very difficult to understand. Takes quite a few years to comprehend this, but so discovering where that central line is, or where the axis point within, in the yin and yang, there's a S shape. Within the S shape, there's a white within the black, and the black within the white principle. These are ever changing. So within the ever changing elements, or elements of the body, there's a form of alchemy to discover where you are actually in that very, very mysterious place. It's neither yin or yang. It's neither black or white. It's somewhere in between. And in that somewhere in between, that's where spirit exudes from you, and then you discover your spirit body in its manifestation. And I've used this particular power to explain things which are virtually impossible to explain, and to move upon the empty spaces within somebody else through feeling and not through fighting.
So that becomes the city that you're using to help facilitate understanding and dissemination. Yeah.
Instead of going through the hard road of physical contact to discover that you have to transcend this. So instead of transcending that, because I taught fighting for 35 years, and now I decided, I'm going to just leave that alone. And for the last 25 years, just focused only on internal soft work. And eventually I will go back. In my 70s, I'll go back for another 30 years into Kung Fu, and then integrate the two together in a way which was probably going to be very unusual for me, because I don't know what I'm going to do yet. And that's the best way to proceed, is not to know how you're going to be arranged by your Am I frozen? Was I frozen? Yeah. Are we still frozen?
Oh, okay, now you're back.
Okay. I don't know where we were. I got lost because I got freeze frame.
Well, actually, you had just finished saying that you had left alone the fighting and that you would do it again for another 30 years and integrate the Kung Fu, and then you froze.
Yeah, and then reevaluate. I'm glad I took my glasses off for a little while, because it really blocks me, doesn't it? Blocks me forever. I got to do it because it's very harsh, the screen. But I just want to show people my eyes, just to get an idea of who I am, because it's very difficult to find out when I've got these lenses on. But to do something so diligently, when I would throw a punch, someone would be say 15, 20 feet away from me, and I would punch multiple punches, and they would be hit by ball bearings, and they were looking at me saying, "What the hell's hitting me?" And I withdrew my hands. I didn't tell them it was me. So there was something developing in terms of something manifesting in between my body and somebody else's body at a great distance. So then I decided, I don't really like that. I'm just going to stop it. And then I went into the internal world more deeply. Deep internal work in terms of my own examination of what was manifesting. And when I go back to the Kung Fu, I'll come back to the Kung Fu with a clean slate, with an absolute clean slate in terms of why should I even do this, and what's the benefit of doing this, and is there some form of integration to create some sort of anomaly that will create that will manifest a more quickened path for the student that is devoted to these types of practices.
Okay.
And that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, because that's going to be starting all over and new. But the old is the same, it's just going to. So when we talked, made an example of like the antenna being likened to, I forget what you called it, but like I think of a radio frequency that's
like a frequency. Yeah.
Yes, and all of that, all the information is already there. It's all the pathways are there. It's up to us to be that vessel to tune in. And by minding, our hallways and our alignment and the quietness, that we may be able to tune into and receive those frequencies, like when we enter a room or face with another.
Yeah, the thing is with the internal world is that you focus on being grounded. You focus on being in a state of levity, which is very light and very heavy. And as you're going through you're studying this inside your body, as your body goes up, something goes down. As your body goes down, something goes up. So there's always another element which accompanies one movement. So you discover where the stowaway is. So if I finally do for long enough, and my feet are in the correct position, my spine's in the correct position, I find a power line. And as I find that power line, I discover something which is hidden from me. But the original teachings for the internal is you work on your grounding, you work on opening your bones, so by connecting yourself to an antenna or putting your head through a ring, so that you disconnect yourself from your body. But then you have to search for what am I meant to look for? Am I looking for being grounded? Am I looking for not being grounded? And it ended up for me is that I went into a visionary state. I think I explained it last time with my wife. The whole secret is in the spine. And the alignment of the spine, and where you put that part of your spine, and then it reveals another modus operandi energetically that you weren't really aware of. So that's the next level of discovery, and that's the stowaway. That's something you've got to discover with the stretching and the rebounding of your fascia, and knitting your body together, and then discovering that that there's a unit of information from the tailbone to the top of the head, and it's a very, very when you hit those lines exactly, there's something very beautiful that enters the body and shows you that you've entered, and it's extremely subtle. So when you find this subtlety, then you search for what else is hidden beyond the realization of something which has already appeared. So you're always looking for something you can't find, because it's so counterintuitively hidden within the prospect of what you need to discover. Is that you've got to be very flexible to turn off all your expectations, so that nothing can be expected, so you can discover something you never saw. And if you discover something you never saw, then you can actually speak about something you never knew, and then you listen to what you can't hear by discussing what you couldn't see.
And then you're teaching yourself by listening to what's coming out. You're hearing it and learning as well.
Yeah, and putting the whole value of your being into another area of a different state of cognition. You're recognizing things that can't be recognized, so it changes you. And through those changes are very, very special. All it does is open you up even more, depending on your character. But even so, the character will be tested to be broken to such a degree that it only has one resource left. It's vulnerability and tenderness, and this you have to govern with very, very accurate discernment.
That can only come from the stillness and the emptiness.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a look at the mountain. And I wanted to wait to do the I am mountain, I am until after we actually knew the mountain. Personally, I looked at the mantra, and I found, the very definition of mantra, because what intrigued me was that you asked the disciples to recite a mantra that they had no idea of the actual symbolism of it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, that's really pretty interesting, but how can it work by blind faith without knowing what it means? And I found two very interesting things. One was that
I did tell them eventually, but I didn't tell them why. And because I didn't tell them why, the question is, years passed. Yeah, of course. I mean, how many years does it take us to realize something we didn't realize? Maybe a century to realize something, or sometimes it took me 30 years to realize something. So it can't be like somebody said, well, I've realized because I've been with Lujan. I said, no, you just wait for 10 or 20 years before you realize anything, because all you do is riding on the energy of what I've discovered, and not discovering what you need to ride on in terms of your own energy after you devote yourself to the principles that I've devoted myself to discover what you're going to become. And what you're going to become will be totally will be in the environment. You will shine as a flower as blue, and maybe I shine as a flower as yellow. I don't know. Maybe I'm green. It's like you can't expect to be the same as the teacher. You have to have the expectation to be yourself. But if you commit yourself to replication, it's just like being socialized. I'm replicating myself. I'm doing exactly what my teacher has done. I've discovered I can do what he does. But are you really? And have you discovered yourself beyond that point? So individuality is a very, very important affair. To take something for 10 or 20 years and assume responsibility for what's been given to you. But as you assume responsibility for it, it manifests you in the containment field of your own energy and your own purity and your own devotion to the process. Then you will be the same as your teacher, but not the same. Nothing like your teacher. And that's why by generation after generation, things rapidly change because the student rapidly changes. And quite frankly, the teacher can teach 20 different people in 20 different ways.
True.
And how rapid will that growth be if everyone cooperates when the teacher's gone?
One of the things I thought that was interesting about the mantra is that the word mantra literally means that which protects the mind. And I looked up that there were a couple of scientific studies that proved how mantras change and affect the body. That's that inner alchemy of the body. And then I read something else where it said a lot of the mantras are actually locked, that the true meaning is not known until there is an initiation or a transmission made. So I needed to understand why the boys were given a mantra of which they didn't understand and what it was to accomplish, and not understanding the symbology of the mountain or phrase. Can we look at the mountain first and then come back to the meaning? Of the mantra?
Yeah, like the meaning, like the mountain itself. I am a mountain, or I am the mountain. I am the mountain is a projection. I am a mountain is the reality of being within substance of myself, without expecting anything. I've become the mountain because I don't believe I'm projecting myself to become like the mountain. I am a mountain. The difference between the two. But you can only say I am a mountain without making the statement that you've become a mountain, because as your density becomes solidified, you become a reflection of the process of your devotion, and slowly the mountain becomes on you. It becomes you. So it's say to the mountain it will move, as long as you believe that the I am the mountain will move away from you, because that's not really you. I am a mountain is the process of life beating you down, and you become the shape of the terrain because of all the elements of the wind, the rain, everything changing the environment. You change with the environmental changes. You become that mountain. But if you stay from a distance, say, well, I've gone through that, and you just talk about somebody going through that, you haven't gone through that. So it's not real. So it's
that's why it seemed like it was a fathom, that it was you said it was untouchable, unobtainable, kind of like the stars in the sky. We see it off in the distance, we see the clouds, and you said, how can we travel to something that's already there? And so there was that contrast between, I guess, the mountain being removed from us, and a mountain is what we already are. That's the part that's already there.
Yeah, you solidify exactly who you are. But it's just like the analogy of the 9 plants. The one plant, it flowers too early. It says, I know, and it doesn't really know. It's just a repetition of something which has been said before. So saying something that has been said before, and then practicing to capture people in the contradictions while they're trying to capture you in your contradictions, because you haven't really arrived. As a young person, they'll be tested, and as they're tested, they use the viable options of those testings to be re-altered, and use the soundboarding of that to actually recreate an answer, instead of the answer coming of its own accord. The answer coming of its own accord is a mountain. Readjusting yourself and realizing you could have said it this way is pretending to be a mountain. It's actually manipulative, quite devious to be that way.
Can you say that again? I missed. So I missed something.
Oh dear, can I repeat what I said? I don't know. If gosh.
Well, I guess what you talked about, how the weathers and the things that come to us change us so that we reflect the terrain, or the terrain reflects us and what we've been going through. But then you made a statement about living in such a way that I missed what the transition was that we didn't want to do. I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's someone pretending that they've been through that through the ability of reading a book and finding a jewel, and then repeating that jewel, and then using that jewel as a testing ground to give it to someone to be dominant over that particular person. Then the person realizes that they're being dominated and say, well, there's a contradiction in what you said. The person goes away and then rearranges themselves, saying, well, I could say it this way, and then they say it this way. That's a flower that's come about too early, because it's manipulative. It hasn't come truly from the heart, and it can't really combat the questioning of the person, because the questioning of the person goes into you, and then you find your contradiction. There's a little bit of conflict there. You're revealed, and then when that person comes back, they say, well, they're the next person. They've got the perfect answer for the perfect situation, but that's not real. That's just learning how to speak in comparison to what's being given to you. It's like a debate, and So a person who debates, if they really reflect and see within that reflection and become true to the debate, then they bring truthfully, yes, I didn't really understand what I said, but now I understand more of what I said that's more truthful. And then they navigate this communication with the openness of their heart. That's the second stage of debate. But the real debate is that you enter me, I speak you.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because if we allow it to happen just like that, then there's no judgment, there's no preconceived ideas, and the message is divine. It's the communion that we need in that moment to fulfill both souls.
Yes, but there can still be a contradiction within that. The person get offended with the directness of this. And through the directness of that, person will dress you in clothing you don't belong in. And if you're not smart enough to see they're dressing you in an alternate frequency, you've got to talk to them and say, no, you've dressed me in the wrong clothing. You're not seeing what I'm saying. You know, so and there's a trap inside of that. So you've got to be very, very quick, not to be redressed, and to be aware that you're being redressed. You know, that's so when you come into a sacred environment, you've got to try and contain that sacred environment when you go into a normal environment. So you don't get re-put together, or you don't get reordered, or you don't get reassembled, you know, from a social way. Yeah, so you've got to attempt not to be reassembled through a higher intelligence back into a social condition position. That's more dangerous than coming there.
Now, see, that clarified it.
Yeah.
So if we have that communion and we get that rejection or the offense that comes back on us with an attempt to redress or reorder us, I like that word, and back into that social construct or into the limitations of the internal dialogue, then we know how to, we're not deflecting it, we're reaffirming our order or who we truly are. Because sorry, Angel. But when you look at the mind is a thief. And the feelings is a projection, like a ghost. So all maybe 75 points in Taoism are reduced to 2, and it's very, very useful because there's only 2 things really going on: what you think, what you feel. How you reorder what you feel by the reordering your thinking. So can you trust these 2 processes when the feeling process is impure and when the mind doesn't want to be dominated, but then the feelings want to dominate somebody else's mind. So then you got a transfer of the thief into somebody else, because you give the notions of the thief, how it steals awareness, and then the ghostly feeling of the transmission of feeling, which seems correct but it's totally incorrect. So this is a very, very difficult path in terms of understanding these particular processes, and you've got to navigate them with so much diligence and be very, very delicate in terms of not expecting something in exchange immediately, but wait for the exchange of your maturity to come upon you. And when the maturity comes upon you, then you have an alteration of what you could have said. You hold it back, and then you're in the position to state what you realize. I like that. We're getting the lessons over and over again with different analogies, different stories, the mango grove and the pruning. It's all, you know, layering the understandings to make it easier to fill us. Now, one thing you talked about in the mounting chapter that I wasn't quite clear on was the use of the tiger paw, and how it appeared as a big comfy pillow until it challenges us on the journey.
Can you imagine that a paw of a tiger is very, very soft, but it's got claws.
Yes.
So the comfort of your life is like a tiger, you're comfortable, but you're not realizing you're being surrounded by claws. By the end of it, you go, oh, I'm trapped. So it's so the socialized feeling is that I don't want to be put under duress, but the mountain will put you under duress. You think you're comfortable until you're into your journey. Then all of a sudden the circumstances start to squeeze you.
Okay.
And as they squeeze you, you're out of your comfort zone. They're the claws. So you're no longer comfortable anymore, and they are testing you to see whether you've got enough substance to see that you're just being tested. It's not personal. So if you don't take it personally, you do everything you can to survive. But if you take it personally, you do everything you can to survive. Which one's going to win? The one who doesn't take it personally, or the one who took it personally?
That makes sense, because those of us that have had cats or have cats know that if you touch the inside of the paw, it's fine.
They don't like it.
Reflexive, those claws come out, and it wasn't personal.
Yeah.
You just triggered that. It wasn't personal. So I understand that better. Okay, so now you also made a point that our body has a certain shield when we're under duress that turns off certain feelings in preparation for trials. That's a protective mechanism.
Yeah, of course. Have you ever done something and you hurt yourself, but you didn't know you hurt yourself until a couple of hours later you go, oh, I didn't even feel that. It's because you were in the process of doing something which you couldn't be stopped doing because it needed to be done. And it's exactly the same when you're rushing in a circumstance where you need to get out of danger. But while you're getting out of danger slightly hits you a little bit here, a little bit there, and it hits you in a certain way that you don't realize you're being hit until you're over the drama, and you say, "Oh, I was hit a couple of times, and I didn't even realize I was hit."
And then we've got to stop the internal dialogue that says, "Oh, how could I have said that differently?" when we didn't realize we were hit. But that was a good example of the being injured, because bruises, cuts, how did we do that? I understand how that is necessary now. That was excellent and made it easy. So you also made the statement that the mountain teaches us how our omnipresence reveals our light in action in the divine timing, that it's all about learning the divine timing and how the mountain reveals that to us.
Well, if you look at divine timing, is that you can be in the middle of a circumstance which is terrible, but you can actually see what's happening. If you don't get triggered into an emotion, you understand that emotion is no longer an obstacle for you, but then the circumstances reveal another obstacle. And that's what life is all about. Once you overcome one obstacle, another obstacle will occur. But the obstacle that occurs as a secondary element of the first experience of being reactive, if you don't react, you begin to see deeply into the matrix. As you see deeply into the matrix, you begin to see nuances of information which are divine. And it's a beautiful thing to slip in between the corridors of people's awareness in terms of what they do, and and be grateful that you can actually see exactly what's going on, and they don't know you're seeing what's going on. This is magical. So it's like how can I explain that I've taken 10,000 steps on the cobblestones of my journey? How can I tell you that I've taken 10,000 steps when you've only taken 200 steps? But if I'm arrogant and don't listen to the person who's only taken 200 steps, I may be captured by those 200 steps, which I am anyway, because they reduce me to their field of perception. As they reduce me to the field of perception, I go, okay, if I don't judge them, if I am separated from the drama which I would normally get entangled in, then something in their path, even though their path is very narrow and there's only 200 steps, one of the cobblestones flies into my perception. Doesn't hit me in the head, flies past me, and then I can see the full potential of who they're going to become. And if I can see the full potential of who they could become, why should I nail them and show them who they are? When it's not appropriate, because I'm not their teacher. But it's a different story when people open up and say, well, can you please show me where I am? And I promise you, I won't rebel. But with a normal person, you can't do that.
No. But was it Awakening the Third Eye where you made it? I wasn't going to mention this. I thought it was off topic, but it's actually not. You talked about having achieved that 1,000 steps, yet encountering someone who was only at 500, and now that reduced us to the 500, kind of like what you were just saying with the 200. And I didn't understand that then. And don't say you just explained it, because but that association limits us by being with someone that has attained only 200 or 500 steps.
Yeah, because you imagine someone who's impoverished. They got their clothing is ripped. This is their perception. They will dress you in their ways and their means of their needs, because they're susceptible. they're kind of begging instead of being grateful for the world itself. And if someone is like this, they will dress you in clothing which doesn't really bother you and doesn't really belong to you. Even if they're wealthy, even if they're totally comfortable, they will see you in terms of their field of perception. So they may put you in different clothing. They may perceive you as something because that's all they can perceive you as. Somebody else may perceive you as something else because they've developed a certain amount of discernment, and that discernment then is put upon you. But if you wear a strange hat and you wear different clothing, everybody's going to dress you in clothing. Who the hell is this guy? And just say, I'm nobody. I'm just dressed a little bit differently because I refuse to wear anything other than jeans and grandfather tops. So I dress like a young man, even though I was very old.
Okay. Not that old.
Not that old.
No. Well, that makes more sense. That makes more sense. So basically, like the 500 steps or the 500 cobblestones can be viewed as limited lenses.
No, let's look at it from your perspective. Let's reverse engineer this.
Okay.
And look at it. This is very exciting to look at it from your perspective. I didn't realize that could be realized like that. So you're undressing yourself and putting another set of clothing on. It's going, oh, I realized, boom, different clothing. So you were dressed in a certain amount of clothing, and as we're having these discussions, you have realizations, and I didn't realize that. So I'm not doing anything, you're doing it to yourself. And as you're doing it to yourself through the reiteration of an explanation of something which is understood this way, and then you see it this way, you just say you got a mirror here and you move to another mirror and your clothing turns blue, and you move to this one, your clothing turns this way. So you're redressing yourself in every single moment. So then you can, if you reverse engineer this, then you'll understand the 200 steps in comparison to 1,000 steps is if you listen very, very carefully to 1,000 steps, you redress yourself. You won't ask the teacher to redress you. You automatically redress yourself, and then the conversation is transformative. But if the student dresses you in clothing because they can't re-examine or reiterate the information within themselves, you have to redress them because they dressed you in the wrong clothing.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And again, that's just being totally aware of where we are, and when we get that shift in perspective, what the result is. So I like that. I want to move to the turtle example, because we talked about, and you and I did too, because this is a good time for that. How
I can be very naughty now. We're going to be turtling. Okay.
Yes, we want the turtle, and the poor turtle that a well-intentioned passerby thought they would help the turtle, and the turtle was in divine timing until someone intervened. And I think that showed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And was the turtle in divine timing though? That's very interesting, because yes, the turtle did exactly what it needed to do because its power allowed it to do that. But was it in divine timing when someone picks it up and put it somewhere else? And then 10 hours later, we come back in the car and somebody has run over it. And then you say, well, the person who moved it interfered with its timing, so it ended up somewhere else. So was the person incorrect, or was the turtle incorrect? So now you've got a dichotomy. Now you've got something to really munch on. You say, okay, my friend, we were in Austin, Texas, and in the book it's carts and donkeys and everything like that, but everything happened in the book was real. So when he picked it up, he thought he was doing the right thing. When he came back, he kind of looked at me sideways like this and kept driving, and looked at the turtle on the road. The turtle on the road crushed. I didn't say anything. Of course, I didn't say anything. Well, I couldn't guilt him, but it was kind of like a tragedy, because the turtle ended up. Oh, you could even say, was it the same turtle? Okay, divine timing. Was it the same turtle? Maybe it was a different turtle. What was happening to that guy? He felt guilty. So what's he going through to feel guilty? Does he have discernment enough to realize it could have been another turtle? It could have been the turtle that was out of timing. It could have been him that was out of timing. So I was set in the middle watching all this. So then I just gave the analogy. And when the analogy was given, then it gives people the possibility of doing this right now. And are people doing what I'm doing right now? Are they saying, is the turtle in the wrong spot? Is the guy that picked up the turtle in the wrong spot? Is the turtle we found the same turtle, or is it the same turtle that we picked up that got crushed? All this you don't know. So then there's a possibility of using subtle discernments of are we correct or are we incorrect? I was watching all this. So then as I was watching all this, all this came up for me as well, but I didn't say anything to him. I just put it in the book as he saw it, not how I saw it. So now I'm showing you how I saw it. So
Yeah.
so then now the story has another spin on it. For those who have read it, it's another spin, because the expectation, social engineered expectation is, oh, Lujan said this, yes, it's out of timing, and the guy was wrong. Look at it from, you reverse engineer it and have another look, because you've got to look at everything with new eyes in every single circumstance. You just can't go, I am right.
Yeah, because see, in my old clothes, I saw this as a lesson not to interfere and give unsolicited advice that would be detrimental to someone, and that was a limited, which I thought was, pretty profound. But that was very limited compared to what you just gave.
But you're just doing exactly what I said I did. I didn't interfere with him. I didn't interfere with the outcome. I just watched it. Okay? I was the one not interfering. I was just watching, but I wrote the story down. But now you're saying exactly what was going on with me. But then the people say, well, am I correct by moving the turtle? Is the turtle in the wrong position? Is the turtle in the right position? Am I in the right position, or am I in the wrong position? I come back. I don't know whether it was the same turtle. So it was 10 to 12 hours later. So there are a whole lot of anomalies there that break you away from your framework into another framework. But because this was given a certain frame, everyone stayed in the frame, as far as I'm concerned. Now we've discovered there is another frame of reference towards this, not to judge any sort of circumstance, because it is the way it is. Same like the mountain. There is no discernment. It's just there is no right, no wrong. It's just an accident. And the person who enters into the accident by hurting themselves, if they get offended, then they sing it from the wrong perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is.
So that's a good way to wrap up this.
Don't embellish.
Got it. Got it.
I'm not saying that to you, beautiful.
No, I know. But that's good. That's a good place to take it, because with the whole mountain was kind of
covered in clouds and mist.
Yes, it really was. But now it's more solid, and I understand a lot more, and that basically the past and the future, like you said, are within the present moment awareness of who we are now, and that's basically the greatest part of that lesson. True. But even through this discussion, you can actually see that there are so many different variables in every single circumstance. But if you take and frame it into a locked situational attunement, then you cannot possibly go back to situational awareness when you've attuned it in a certain way, because situational awareness and situational attunement, aren't they exactly the same? I think I know from this physical circumstance that I've energetically got it. Have you? That's the way we've got to watch our life like this continually. So you see with my glasses on, you can't really see me, but when I take my glasses off, you begin to see me. So for those who look at me without the glasses, then with the glasses on, the assumption of knowing me is not quite there. It's just because there's a frame of glasses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it does change that. It changes.
It changes, yeah. It does change, yeah.
All right, so let's go back under the Bodhi tree for some reflections on your journey. Our journey so far. You said that we're, with the boys coming back, and I think they're in their 20s by now, sitting under the Bodhi tree with the Grove Master. And when he says, let's reflect on the journey, he says, we're still in the mangrove grove, but we traveled the precarious peaks of the mountain and now have made our way to the flatlands of new beginnings. So, which is nice. But But one thing you said that was very interesting to me, because I thought it was an incomplete thought, or I missed it. You talked about the layered content being revealed in 9 different ways. We've been seeing this layered content. But I tune into numbers and I'm looking for the checklist. But
okay, yeah. So even though we've spoken about the turtle, there are different perspectives on that, even on reflection in terms of discussion, in terms of revealing. So there are many different ways. If I said no, there were 9 different ways, it was because there were 9 different people. 9 different people will see nine different things.
Got it. I was looking for that question to be answered. So
yeah,
simple.
because if you look at it from a mathematical perspective, it's 9 different people, but 2 people can see almost the same way. But when you examine the person's true insights, you'll begin to realize that more jewels come from what they understand, and then the person who thought they understood that was similar, they reveal the jewels of what they believed they understood through the input of somebody else's understanding. So understanding always changes, always grows, always adapts, or it always changes. So if a group of people, they sit down for some sort of communal inspiration, the communal inspiration always bounces off the revealing of one person to the group, and then the group has a collective intention to bring about another realization from another individual. Now, this works in our world, and it is operational in our world. You give children an Xbox and they're fighting with guns and everything, killing people. That's for the military complex. That's got nothing to do with children. It's got to do with we give a warlike perspective to a tender consciousness. The tender consciousness goes out, changes the perspective of the people who are think tanking about what they need to do next to grow a certain weaponry. So they give it to young people, and the young people exude this energy. Then the think tank has a resource of innocence where they should leave our kids alone. And not give them these Xboxes and things like that to play with, because it goes into the collective consciousness, and they'll realize this is a very, very well-known fact.
Yeah.
In the military complex, there's a well-known fact that if you don't need to remote view to find something, all you got to do is do something, and then what's the result of your own realizations? You certainly will find out something because of collective consciousness if you tune in properly. And they know these sciences. It's just that we're about 30 steps behind them, and that's the way that they operate.
We're going to come back to this remote viewing in another topic. I'm making a note because I want to come back to that at another time.
Actually, remote viewing is not my talent. Reverse remote viewing is what I do. I was counseling somebody who is in the Pentagon, and he told me certain stories, and then I asked him to reveal the people he was having conflict with, and he said he was ground forces, and I said, you're not ground forces. I just saw the people because you told me the story. I didn't remote where you are. I reverse remote viewed your memory. I caught him in the middle of it, and he couldn't understand reverse remote viewing in comparison to remote viewing, because reverse remote viewing is not going out and looking, it's waiting to receive the information because you're in contact.
And it comes in and you see it as when you talked about seeing his memory, you see it kind of as a mist or a track of how he got there.
No, not really. It's if you don't have the same devious means, then you'll be awakened by I saw 2 different people in 2 different uniforms, male and female. I saw the glass and everything like that in where he was, and then I knew he wasn't ground forces. He wasn't dressed in that uniform. So they weren't dressed in that uniform. And then I confronted him. I said, "No, you're not ground forces."
So you were able to uncover his deception with that clarity.
Yeah, well, he wanted to see whether I could, obviously.
Oh, that was a test.
That was a test. Yeah, it was a test.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing I thought was interesting as you were there talking to the boys under the Bodhi tree was you said for them to give voice to the wisdom that they come upon in order to make clear the potential that's within each transmission. And I have the luxury of doing that in real time.
Okay. Didn't I say not to give voice to what they realize?
To give voice, I thought the admonition was to give voice to what they realize. Was it not to? No, to go out into the world and not to give voice to what they realize, just to be kind. Okay. Just to be kind and open, and to give voice to it through a bodily sensation of devotion to the people that they realize.
but young men should not confront the older people. The older people must be given a certain amount of devotion so that they can actually see that the character of the people are growing appropriately, instead of those boys talking to the older people because they've learned from the Mango Grove master and overriding their lifelong journey by a young person saying, I know better than somebody who's older. No, you're kind to those people, and you don't tell them what you realize, because if you tell them what you realize, it may be an imposition for the older person. So the only thing you can do with an older person that can't realize is to be kind to them. And as you're kind to them, they gravitate towards the open-heartedness of someone who doesn't want to dominate through superior means of saying, I know this and you don't. So young people have to withhold and be kind and be open to allow the maybe the older people may dress them in clothing that doesn't belong to them, and don't speak to that, but be kind to those people until they take away their ability to dress you in something. They don't dress you in anything because they've been supported and kindness has been given to you. Their heart opens up towards you, and then they begin to notice who these young people are in comparison to being a student of the Mango Grove master. Instead of them saying, I'm the student of the Mango Grove master, I'm going to tell you what to do, how to act and how to behave. Not appropriate for a young person to do that to an older person.
Thank you, because I kind of missed a whole lot.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You're lovely.
I missed that one, but but now that makes more sense. To give, not to give voice to what comes upon them at that point in time, but to give kindness.
Yes, but the thing is, maybe what would come up on maybe a 25-year-old, when they're maybe 35, 40, it may be there may be different words coming, but maybe they've assumed to know something, and in the Mango Grove is don't assume you know anything, because if you assume you know something, you get trapped within that assumption. So don't assume. Be pure, be open, be kind, be loving. Because I'm not going to tell you something for 5 years, so why go into the village and tell everybody what you know?
Exactly, because 5 years later, it'll be a totally different story. Nothing that we expected.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to bring out, the last point I made with regard to the Bodhi Tree chapter, was that you stated that the realizations that are received through our inaction are the true transmissions. That's the acoustic song resonates within the prayer, but that's the true transmission, true truth.
Yeah. If you drop a pebble in a pond, the ripples will go to the edge and then slowly come back to the center, and as it gets to the center, it disappears from itself. So when it disappears from itself, how can you say you understood what has happened? Until the ripples disappear, you say, what am I missing? Because I can't really understand that, because the ripples goes very, very strong to the edge and slowly disappear as they come back to their source. As they disappear, as they come back to the source, this is what we're meant to do, disappear. So that we can't make the assumption that we know something. If we make the assumption we fully know something, we'll solidify that into a frame that can't be broken, and that frame will be protected and be guarded by the person, because that's their wisdom. Wisdom is to wait for the ripples to go into emptiness, to discover who you are from that emptiness through your experience, instead of discovering who you are through the ripples, because that's kind of dangerous. It's repetitive. It's like a groove that's been carved into wood. As soon as you run your finger over it, you go, oh, there's a groove there. You don't want those grooves. You want to be very, very smooth.
Okay, I like that. I can see that, the ripples and coming back. So
yeah,
thank you. Okay, for our last chapter today, the riddle. It's the knowing and doing that are going to be deciphered. I've got that, you mentioned, do you realize or do you really realize, and that how we have to unwork our riddle.
Okay, well, that goes into the same analogy. What do you realize, or do you really realize? That's like the dropping the pebble in the pond. It goes to the edge. You think you know something, and then it comes back. Do you realize, or do you really realize this? Do you really realize what you're meant to realize when there's no movement? But if you realize when there's movement, do you really realize?
And one of the reasons we might not realize is you mentioned that our past has been given disproportionate relevance to our lives because we're not fully present in that moment.
Oh, that's lovely. Can you repeat that again?
The past has been given a disproportionate relevance in our lives because we're not present in the present moment awareness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You don't need to say anymore. You just said it all.
It was beautiful. So now, to define for those that are still not quite sure, you describe a knowing, whether it's cultural, genetic, environmental bias, but a knowing reflects the false certainty of perceived truth of the present moment, justified by our past influences up to that point. And that can also be the intellectual internal discourse without the benefit of heart integration. So those are the knowings that we might get trapped into, and a different definition that you mentioned there.
Yeah, well, when you're being and you have a complete knowing, you've got to look at the thing is you will know something, but what can you do with what you know? You've got to not do what you know. But in the area of not knowing, there are portions of the doings within the not knowing which propel you away from the not doing by elements of knowing within the not doing. So you've got to be careful with the not doing, because they can become amplified in a way which is incorrect. So being, knowing, and then not doing is to set free the person from all the elements of your predetermined idea of what is in front of you, and giving it a length and breadth to breathe in a way which will give you an alternate view of what's occurred in terms of the magic that you arrive upon, even if the person doesn't change. And this is the magic of being, knowing, and not doing, and then not transferring any doings into that not doing, because it's very dangerous to settle information into a not doing, because it becomes a reflective mechanism, and that's it's kind of like a malformed element of recapitulation, because being, knowing what happened in the past is actually amplified by the product of the past as you know it in the future, and you'll only amplify what you're focused on, or what you feel you need to focus on. But how many areas do you really remember from the past? That's when you ask yourself that question, you always go back to the same thing to recapitulate. That's because we've got a certain focus, a certain emphasis on what we want to work on, and is that what we're really meant to work on? So yeah, is that really what we're meant to work on? And recapitulation is basically the present moment realization of what's happening right in front of you. And if you can come to terms with that, then you can alter the past elements of somebody else's idea of you, instead of you trying to change the idea of yourself. Because interfering with the idea of yourself is irrelevant, because it's already done. It's a waste of time to go back. It's not a waste of time to watch what you're doing, because you work on what you're doing, because what you're doing is something you can really examine, because it's in the present moment, and you examine it as you do it. If you don't realize it, then you keep doing it. But it's got nothing really to do with the past, unless you've assigned feeling to something that you feel is relevant, and that goes back into misplaced memories in the book. So it's it's a very, very complex area to actually define and to traverse.
And we do our misplaced memories on the next interview.
Yeah. But, and that's very beautiful. Sometimes I get my students, so I give them the Power of Emptiness when they come into the room, into my office, and I sometimes when I discover that they've got biases in the past and they're pretty angry, I get them to read that. Oh, they cry their eyes out, and it's such a joy to see them. Oh gosh, it's me, not my father. It's me, not my mother. It's me, not my brother. It's me that's done it to myself.
And see, that's
because they're no longer in their life anymore.
that upsets the whole psychology industry for rehashing the past and blaming parents. You just killed an entire industry. And
Squished.
and a lot of Toltec teachings that say go back and dredge up absolutely everything you've done in your life, as I thought that was
No,
the meaning of
no,
recapitulation.
everything will be redredged in terms of who you are right now. Everything has a karmic effect right now. To absolve yourself of your karma is not to be emotionally attached to your past, not to be emotionally attached to your future, but to be in the living moment that you're in and examine who you are and the mistakes you make in that particular moment. That's where the true journey is. It's not in your past and not in your future. And the present moment is not contingent on the being in the present moment, because that's impossible. Because this present moment is just shifted to the future incrementally from the past. It's gone to the future, and we're traveling this like this. And the past comes like this. You see, it follows you. So
Okay, now that makes more sense.
Present moment should be just like this, and you slowly travel into your future. Let that go.
Okay, that makes more sense. I figured it was a way that the way that recapitulation was taught was a way to avoid a major afterlife review of all the punishments and all the things you've done wrong.
No, your heart will definitely do that for you. You don't need to do it. Everything's stored inside of you here. So look right here. Everything you need to look at is right here. Everything you're doing is right here. Everything you're saying is right here. Everything you're feeling is right here. Everything you're doing is right here. It's not there, and it's not there. So it's and I'm very naughty when it comes to this, really. But the ever-present moment is always exchanging itself with you. And as it exchanges itself with you, it tests the person you are right now. It doesn't test the person who you were, because you're not there anymore. You're here. So let it go. And be a better person right now, not in the future.
This is so good. This is so wonderful. Everything was so smooth and leads us right to the door of our misplaced memories, which is where we're going to take up next time. So I thank you so much. This has been so great. It's wonderful to see your eyes. That sparkle in your eyes transmits something. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, you're just goddamn beautiful, girl, I tell you.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet. But this is a perfect place to end it. Is there anything else you want to say?
Now, I want everyone to know I'm not religious based, but forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they do. So why was that said? Forgive them, Father. My heart is my Father. Forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they do. Do I have a bias to want to punish them or be in the area of punishing them because they're punishing me? Forgive them, for they don't know what they do. If we have this attitude, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Just forgive them. Because if you judge them, you put that judgment inside of yourself, and you will be judged. So forgive everybody. Forgive everybody for what they're doing, because you can't change it, but you can understand that they need to change. And the only reason they're doing the cruelty is because they've been taught to do the cruelty. They know nothing else. So the immaturity of that cruelty will amplify itself through group awareness, in terms of what do you call it, in terms of alignment with other people, to say, I'm doing this, aren't you happy I'm doing this? No. I'm doing this because everybody's agreeable to it, and when it's absolutely wrong, forgive them. Forgive everybody. Forgive everybody. You need to forgive everybody. If you can't, if you can forgive someone and they're still a feeling, then cry through it. Just release them. Release them from the center of yourself, because from the center of yourself, if you don't forgive them, then you'll be judged. And you judge you immediately, as soon as you judge something, you're judged. That's just it's simple. It's not Christianity. It's the truth. I'm going to judge you. I'm already judged. So I have to, please forgive me, I've just judged you. So reverse engineer these things. You've got to reverse everything. So, and I know I've just opened up your closing. I'm very bad. So
no, this is great, because just for you to change the focus of that prayer, just to the Lord God of my being, forgive them from the heart, changes the meaning and the depth of that.
But the thing is, when somebody does this, then the earth will crack in half. For the people who've done it. And isn't that the truth? Doesn't the world fall to pieces? For somebody, if it's not during their life, it'll be at the very end of it. So there will always be a thunderbolt to give you the why and the where of, oh my God, I made a mistake.
It's a beautiful thing to end with, forgiveness, and make sure we throw ourselves in there too.
Yep. Otherwise
are very hard on ourselves. So
yeah.
Self-forgiveness and self-compassion is necessary as well.
Anyway, Angel, I love you so much. You're so beautiful.
Love to you. Whoops, my pen.
Okay, so
this is so wonderful. So until next time.
Until next time, my lovely.
Visit parallelperception.com for any additional information. Go back over all the videos again and again. And you'll see layers and more things unfold with each time. Thank you, Lujan, so much.
Thank you so much, Angel.